Mikal Bridges to the New York Knicks, mind blown. Villanova is supreme, and all of the jokes that Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson were throwing in his face on every single podcast is finally dissolved. Congratulations to Mikal Bridges, hashtag freed our guy. Let's jump into some of the historical context that's somewhat similar to the Knicks and how he's been doing recently. So this past year, he averages 25-4 on 16 field goal attempts. That's like pretty solid, not necessarily mind-blowing. He has consistently shot better the more that he's assisted. If you think back to the Chris Paul days over in Phoenix, that just makes a lot of sense, I think, intuitively for anybody, but especially when you think back to the last time you saw him play, which, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, probably. Pretty effective outside shooter. I mean, hovered around that high 30s, 40% mark, but it's clear he really, really likes the mid-range, and I think that becomes relevant when you think about him positionally on the floor. He has played the small forward this past year by far the most of any position, but he's had stretches in previous seasons where he oscillates between the small forward and the shooting guard position. It goes without saying his mid-range frequencies will climb when he's playing the two because he's typically going to be bigger and longer, and that just makes it easier to just pull, particularly with his outside shooting. He's just way more effective when he is assisted, and obviously going to assist him like Brooklyn's with not the most incredible ball movement and point guard, at least when you think back to his days over with Phoenix and Chris Paul. The efficiencies are going to dip, and obviously the shot attempts are going to go up, and yada, yada. Most importantly and notably to me is the defense. He has built a very, very sound reputation as a wing perimeter defender, and the past 2 years in Brooklyn has sustained that. The numbers suggest probably what you assume. The offense, number of attempts have gone up, efficiency has gone down, he's had to self-create more, so it hasn't looked as pretty, but the defense has been so consistent. In the past 2 years with Brooklyn, his defensive on-off indicators have been in the 71st and 80th percentiles, respectively, on top of the greater offensive load that he's balancing, which is really, really important. Even more so, he is the NBA's Iron Man and has not missed a single game in the last 6 consecutive seasons. I can just hear Tibbs salivating on the floor for that level of endurance. It just makes it hilarious. I just have to say it. I mean, he's defensively talented, defensively versatile, offensively versatile. His mid-range game, everybody knows the mid-range is virtually unstoppable once you reach a certain threshold. And especially on a team with an incredible creator like Brunson and all the gravity and yada yada. And to just sprinkle the Iron Man piece where he literally hasn't missed a game in the last 6 consecutive seasons. I mean, this is just a wet dream for Tibbs. I'm just like, I honestly just forgot. So, wow. That's cool. I think one of the fair shortcomings or maybe development areas for the Knicks is in their offensive release valve department. And obviously, one of the easiest ways to do that is just have a really, really solid mid-range shooter that can get his shot off whenever. You know, your mind goes to the Devin Bookers, the Bradley Beals. Phoenix, just go to Phoenix, you know. And granted, a lot of times these are pretty tough shots, but they do lead to more free throw attempts, which is validated by his numbers. I mean, 4 to 5 free throw attempts a game is actually pretty solid when you think about it. I mean, a lot of guys with bigger builds and bigger frames and even more usage and involvement on the offensive end don't even average that much. And so I think that Mikal coming in as that release valve when the offense stagnates, when there's a really difficult matchup, particularly for Brunson, my mind goes to what Boston did to Dallas, where they just cut off the circulation of Luka and Kyrie to the rest of the team. And it's like, well, the other guys can't do anything, and there's no release valve, right? It's like, if it's not them, there's nothing else. If it's not Brunson and he's getting swallowed up by Jrue Holiday, well, at least we have this guy who can self-generate, put it on the deck, and even if it's not a great pass to begin with, this is the kind of guy that you want on your team to just still get the ball and be able to get somewhat of a decent shot up. And then you move over to the implications for the New York Knicks now. Number one, the Villanova connection is real. I think that's a beautiful story. We're probably going to see it in a documentary a decade from now or something. I respect that for New York, but I really would caution what this signals for this team, particularly Julius Randle, who didn't even play in the postseason and had that elongated shoulder dislocation problem. This whole, like, we are Villanova, but you're not, but we're on the same team, but we've been best friends forever. The Knicks just built such a great culture, this group of guys. Everybody's down to play 500 minutes a game, and it doesn't matter, and we're all just going to break our bodies apart for the game, and that's what it's going to be. Yeah, you had this Villanova trio, great, but then you also had Deuce McBride coming out of nowhere and just not missing threes, and that was crazy. And then you had Isaiah Hartenstein just having unbelievable breakout postseason and kind of whole season. Defensive value, but also the offensive value right, at that short, wacky float shot thing that was just unstoppable at his size and efficiency. OG, recent acquisition as well, him getting in there. So I just say all that to say it felt like a real deal ragtag group of dudes. Some of them had been on that previous team together, and that was kind of the heart and soul, and all these other guys were down to, buy into the system. And now you have another dude who has just been clowned on for not being with them on their team, and the franchise sold a shit ton of the farm to get him on the team now, and maybe your second best overall players didn't even play in the postseason that, let's be honest, you probably overachieved at based on all the injuries and everything going on. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little bit worried. Hope that overall culture is not going to be too disturbed. It has to be inclusive, and particularly reintegrating Julius Randle into this lineup, assuming he's going to be in the lineup, has to be paramount for this team. A lot of guys played a lot of minutes that might not even be starting, and I'm looking at you, Josh Hart. That's going to be tough. So I hope Tibbs is going to be able to lay the iron fist, kind of is the ideal coach for that whole thing where I don't give a fuck about you and who you are. We're going to play this way, and nobody is allowed to have an ego, and you're going to do everything that I say until you die. And, maybe it'll work out. Unclear if they're going to get OG back. I'm assuming they will. I don't know why. Am I just, testes are whispering that he's going to figure it out. Everybody there was like sucking him off for playing incredibly, and they were super, super good before his wacky elbow thing. I know they're trying to bring Hardenstein back. I'm assuming they're going to get fucked by some apron, and that's going to be a big deal. But the Knicks, I know for a fact, have been notoriously underpaying for shit forever, and it just makes absolutely no sense. And I'm assuming that they still make a shit ton of money, even though they've been mid to suck for most of my conscious life. So now, presumably, you have the starters as Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG, Randle, and Hardenstein. What I love the most about that is the flexibility on both ends of the floor with Mikal and OG specifically. I mean, OG slots in the 4 fine. Granted, the offensive stuff is not going to be as potent, but Mikal is another instance of this more egalitarian and balanced offensive team now, where you basically have the insurance in the back of your head that OG can slot into the 4 fine. The offensive potency initiation-wise is also probably going to be fine between your tandem of Brunson, Mikal. And then even on top of that, let's just say Randle gets hurt again or something. I mean, we just saw how insanely effective Josh Hart is, as well as Dante DiVincenzo. You don't make it to the second round of the playoffs averaging God knows how many minutes. I mean, Josh Hart rested for like 3 minutes a game. On top of that, I'm really curious about the Randle OG defensive Rubik's Cube as well. Getting Randle in foul trouble, what have you, whatever the matchup is. I mean, you go Brunson, Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Isaiah Hartenstein. Okay, defensively, that is an incredible lineup. And I love the fact that you have Josh Hart's rebounding. Mikal is always going to be keeping guys away from the rim to rebound as well because of his outside potency. There's really not that much of an entry point aside from Brunson. I mean, that's just it with the Knicks is Brunson is going to deliver all of this offensive potency that is going to far outstrip any defensive vulnerability and risk, but there is going to be vulnerability and risk. And what did you do? Well, you just got an 88th percentile defensive on-off guy on your roster who can oscillate between the 2 and the 3. You have these defensively minded guys with defensive instincts that are going to just offer more flexibility and versatility depending on the matchup. And then even on top of that, super sneaky idea as well. I know there's a lot of buzz and it's all the rage now to just say every team needs to have a 5-out look. I wonder if you could get away with Randle at the 5. I don't know if it's possible. I have no idea. I feel like I haven't seen Julius Randle play basketball in at least 6 years. But he's enormous, and I think about him like matching up again with like Boston's Al Horford or something. He can probably defend Al Horford okay. It depends on how they want to play, but that was just an idea I had. I'm not really sure if that's possible. Randle's really, really strong too, which I personally kind of like against a Kristaps, for example, where yeah, he's enormous. They're really smart with their switches, and they're probably not going to spoon feed KP when he's matched up with Randle. It's just an extra step that you have to go through in order to get him off of a Kristaps Porzingis. And I think we've seen that before with these very tall, long guys. Is maybe one of the most effective ways to slow them down, actually, is with strong physical guys. And that's kind of exactly what Julius Randle is. That's also basically what OG Anunoby is. And then, of course, you ultimately come down to the secondaries, who are kind of great. And, of course, they're a little more battle-tested now, but Deuce McBride, I think, was a wonderful story, especially his outside shooting, which, again, him and Lou Dort, just, I don't know how these guys, who are the shooting coaches that Brooke Lopez, like, these dudes just wake up one day and they're like, you know what, I'm going to shoot like 41%. Fine. He did really great. Obviously, he's young. Dante, we're all aware of, is maybe one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA right now. I feel like Dante is right there with the Isaiah Joe in Oklahoma City, Sam Hauser in Boston, these guys that come in off the bench that are just firecrackers, you know. Josh Hart, who we all know is not only durable as all hell as well, but is a walking 12 to 13 rebound guy, even at some of the highest stages of the playoffs. And Precious Achiuwa as well, coming in from Toronto. I loved his game when he was over with Toronto, and he just stepped right up, gave a lot of energy as well. Obviously, he wasn't given a ton of minutes, but he showed a lot of defensive promise as well and seemed to be a great system guy for them. And then, of course, you have Robinson. And, you know, again, with the system guys, as far as a backup big man, I mean, he just showed a lot of promise on the defensive end as well. Not quite at that Robin Williams help side level, but I mean, kind of similar. Obviously, had that injury, Embiid kind of fucked him, but, you know, it is what it is. So I just say that to say Brunson, mikal, OG, Randle, Hardenstein, starters, secondaries, McBride, Dante, Hart, Achiuwa, Robinson. Ton of Tibbs guys. More offensive initiation potency, defensive versatility, Julius Randle insurance in slotting into that 4 and everybody coming down. Bench offensive potency, especially from the perimeter with Deuce McBride and Dante DiVincenzo, who are lights out from 3. I mean, these guys are great. And if I was the Knicks, I would be paying an arm and a leg to retain OG Anunoby. And if they don't, I would not want to be a New York resident in the preceding days and or weeks following that, because this is an incredibly formidable team assembled of basically quintessential Tibbs guys that, yeah, the upside is really promising. So we will see. I'm really curious. Obviously, everybody's waiting for the OG contract. And of course, I am personally going to be really curious about the integration of Randle alongside a mikal, as well as the overarching Villanova umbrella that is now the New York Knicks. So, all right, guys, that is it for today. Hopefully that was helpful. And until next time.